Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. Let me say that better. No Soundbites Allowed podcast. I am your guest and your host. I'm your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. And I'm here with one of my great guests on the program. And this is Dr. Giovanni Scaringi. And I'm going to show him, here's our a little image of us from back in, I think it was 2015. As we were talking about the Front Street Gateway project, a renovation for low and modified low-income housing, one of several events that we've spoken about together. But more importantly, folks, let me show you. This is Dr. Giovanni Scaringi.
Looking really bad on a Saturday afternoon with a hat and a cup of coffee.
Well, you know, it's that kind of day. It's raining outside, by the way, folks.
It is.
And so he's been gracious enough to come in and talk with us and it's also Memorial Day weekend. So, I mean, you got to have some time to give people the chance to relax. And that's what I like about this program. I prefer you to be relaxed and just have a conversation.
Absolutely. It's good to be back. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so happy to have you here. Folks, just to cover a little ground from the past to today, when we first spoke, it was back in your campaign.
Yeah, 2015.
2015, we were speaking about your plan to run. At the time, you were a professor at SUNY Broome, and you had made the decision to become a politician running for the city council seat in Binghamton, New York. And a lot has changed since then, and that's why...
Very much.
One of the things, you're now doctor, and that's why I put it in there. Dr. Giovanni Scaringi. And by the way, folks, if we've spoken to each other many, many years now, and so I call him Gio. And
for sure it works.
Yeah. And so if you hear me say Gio all of a sudden, that's just...
That's all it is. Yeah. Informal is best.
You tend to be informal most of the time.
Yeah. I've never been one for titles.
Although you earned it.
Yeah. I mean, you work hard and, you have your family and your friends and, around you that support you, and you do what you got to do.
Absolutely. And you do it well.
Try to. Appreciate it.
There's no question about the success. You're a homeowner. You're a professor. You're at SUNY. You're at Binghamton University as well as SUNY Broome in your classes. You're looking at re-election, which up until about 2 days ago was completely unopposed.
Yeah, we had did a pretty progressive push throughout the petition period, but if you read the New York State election law, I believe the deadline is next Tuesday, actually May 28th by 5 p.m. If someone wants to, they can collect signatures to actually create. It's what's called an independent petition to actually create your own political party line, and I've always been about ballot access, and if someone goes out and gets those signatures properly, the more the better.
Yeah, well, it's never bad to give people choice.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things I always promote here, that no matter what you believe politically, whether you agree with me or not, I don't care, go out and vote, because your voice is your vote, and if you're not voting, you have no voice.
That's right.
So... and we can't improve things if we don't all get our voice out there and vote.
Absolutely.
Although I have to say that in my experience, in what I see in the community and my personal experience, you should slam dunk this, but
never hold. Service is a privilege. It's not a job. It's not a right. And you've got to earn it every time, and so that's what we're going to set to do out this year. And if we win, we'll be honored to serve another 4 years, as we have term limits in the city of Binghamton, which I personally think is a good thing.
Yes.
And if we don't, that's okay. We can take pride in what we've done over the last 4 years and assist with whoever the new councilman or councilwoman-elect would be, and help with that transition, and then move forward.
I want people to know, this isn't just rhetoric, because I hate rhetoric. That's why it's called No Soundbites Allowed. We don't do rhetoric here. And people should know, even without a opponent in the race, You've been out, twice now to every single member of your constituency?
We've already been knocking on doors since. For your listeners who may not know, there were some election changes that Albany undertook this year, starting in mid-January, I think, somewhere around there.
Mid-January.
And one of them was that the primary day, forgive me, due to a court case a few years ago, we had a federal primary that was in June, and then we had state and local primaries that were in second Tuesday in September.
Right, and that's statewide.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct, regardless of whether anything that's state or municipal. And what they did was they actually combined those two primaries, but not into the September one like it used to be a few years ago. They actually combined them into the June one. So the petition process to get on the ballot obviously would have to be done prior to primary day at a bare minimum, besides the general election. So by moving primary day, that was normally or traditionally in September, to June, that would require obviously the petition process to be moved up as well. So this year was from February 26th through April 4th, I believe it was.
Yes.
So we've been knocking on doors since mid-February.
Yeah.
So.
And I've talked about that process and the fact that it was done very much so by the single party leadership of the state of New York, all Democrats, because they wanted to help New York City, where you can go from one building to another in the middle of February in New York. And for people who don't know New York, especially upstate New York weather, you're talking about snow, you're talking about single digit, if not lower temperatures, not including wind chill, 2-3 feet of snow for much of the state. So, while it's great in New York City to go from one building with, 500 people to another building with 1,000 people, in upstate New York, you're trying to travel, either walk or drive through 2 feet of snow in, frigid Arctic conditions.
Yeah, I will.
Crazy.
I will say, for someone like myself who loves the beach and just loves to kind of lay out and get a nice tan, it definitely was a change going from slacks and a polo to very thick gloves, hand warmers, and a really big hat. But you push through, you do what you got to do. You got to work within the system, and you get it done.
Yeah, and you are. I gotta say, and I thank you for joining me here on the 200th episode.
I was about to say, congratulations, 200. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a milestone right there.
Been pushing. And it's incredible. And I should probably mention, for people who don't know about this, if you look at the count on the podcast, they'll say 239. That's because that includes the SUNY Broome Republicans podcast.
Oh, okay.
Which I also pushed out here. But for No Soundbites Allowed, it's 200 exactly.
Congratulations.
But there's been so much. And you were the first politician, elected official that I had on the show. Since then, we've had Democrats, progressives, conservatives, libertarians, Larry Sharp as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, Donna Lapardo, who's an assemblywoman, county executive Jason Garnar, who's a county executive, obviously, though they're Democrats. So we've had everyone on the program.
That's good.
But they took their lead from you.
If anybody's following me, that's scary. Stay back.
No. They're great because he did such a great job. It's one of our top interviews on the program since we've been doing in all 200 episodes. And we've had, 2/3, half of all the programs have interviews.
Oh, wow.
And so you've been right there at the top. What's changed? Let me ask you, what's it like to be a politician? Let's start there.
Again, I love the title of the podcast. Personally, I hate the term politician, but I'm not going to hide behind it. I've kind of a little bit more of a traditionalist in that sense. I long for the days where we used to call people public servants, but more importantly, people who served in those roles actually lived by that credo. And unfortunately, we don't see that a lot today. But being in elected office, it's an eye opener. It is, coming from someone with a private sector background and now being in the public sector and higher education. government, municipal government is kind of a whole montage in and of itself. New York State, as I'm sure you and many of your listeners are very well aware, is a unique animal unto itself. But our goal, and I always try to speak in the plural because you never do something on your own. It always starts with the individual, but you work with people to get things done. I've always been there's a very important interconnectivity there. I've always been shocked at people who say that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
Because I've always told people that that's a half truth. It is true. It does take a village to raise a child, but it takes individuals to make a village.
True.
And it all starts with individuals making those choices, and then working as a collective group. But you always have, the largest minority in the United States is the individual.
True.
And, that should always be the basis of everything. But being in elected office more specifically, it's humbling. It's incredible. It can be chaotic at times. You walk into that building, you walk into that chamber, and, you always have to remember, at least as it relates to the city of Binghamton, you're representing essentially, very broadly, 1/7 of about 46,000 people, and it's my mindset is always, when you walk through that door, you hang your coat, you hang your hat, and you also have to hang your ego and your personal beliefs. If you, I always tell people if you get elected to office, regardless of the capacity, and you serve a 2-year term, a 4-year term, a 6-year term, whatever it might be, if you go through that entire term and are content, as a legislator at least, with every single vote you've ever taken, you are doing something incredibly wrong.
See, a lot of politicians don't look at it that way, and I love, because you're highlighting some things like being humble. And I know you. We've had many conversations off the record and separately, individually, where I know some of the thoughts you have on some issues, and I have watched you bite your tongue on the passion that you have for an issue.
Yeah.
And rather than as a person, as an individual, that you tame that down and to be able to properly represent, and in some cases even not necessarily your opinion, but the one of your constituents, you present that separate of, let me go out here and just, we've seen many politicians, especially locally, who've gone out there and they just berate, they make accusations, they've allegations, and they showboat.
Sure.
And they stand on a soapbox and spend the time of elected office to be able to promote a very specific ideology. And in our region, I know we have a lot of people who watch this around the world, but in our region of the southern tier of New York, we've seen them, many of them from the progressive left, like Citizen Action, political progressive leaders of tomorrow, or otherwise known as PLOT, Black Lives Matters. These are my statements in understanding.
Of course.
But they represent these very fringe left groups, and they use their time to stand on a soapbox and promote these ideas, which aren't the views of their constituents per se. And I love the fact that you've been humble enough not to. You don't follow that lead. You don't do that.
Yeah, because it's at the end of the day. I mean, it happens on the left. It happens on the right.
It does happen on the right.
At the end of the day, it's rhetoric. It's garbage. It's at the expense of getting somewhat biblical sounding. It's a tree that bears no fruit. You can say whatever you want. I can say whatever I want, but at the end of the day, what actions follow those words that actually carry some weight, so to speak? And I think it's also important to remember I personally, I have certain opinions and positions on, policies,
Well, you're a
X,
human
Y,
being.
and Z. Yeah, I mean,
You're going to.
everybody has those things, and that's good, right? But I mean, I can even remember.
This is going to be good, folks.
No, it's funny, when to not get ideological, but just to provide an ideological example. I remember back in 2015, we were knocking on doors. It was one day I was at one particular door on the northern part of the district that I represent, and had a great conversation with this very, very nice lady, and met her husband, and they were very kind, invited me inside. We had a cup of coffee. I looked down at my watch, and before I knew it, oh my goodness, 40 minutes had gone by, and
Right.
she was very kind, very supportive, and it was actually the first time we'd ever met. And I asked her if I could put a lawn sign on her lawn. She said, yeah. And I was very appreciative. And, her and her husband were very supportive. And coming into 2016, with the presidential election and things like that, I drove by her house one day on my way to work, and she had a Bernie Sanders lawn sign on her front lawn. And I said to myself, I said, my goodness, I said, I never would have expected that someone who had supported a senator such as Senator Sanders would, publicly
A raving socialist.
Support me. And, the reason why I use that example is not to bite off anything on myself, but I think that it's important for us people in office to remember that you are going to get those days, particularly when you are a legislator. But even if you're an executive, you're going to get those people that, may be on the opposite aisle of you or on the other side of the political spectrum, whatever it might be. And we've lost the ability to just talk to people. That's the reason why I use that example that I did. And what we tried our best to do, what I tried my best to do, was to just follow that simple premise. People are a collection of their, how they were raised, their environment, their belief systems, their past experiences, their current life situations, and at the end of the day, I mean, it sounds incredibly corny, but, we are more similar than we are different
On almost every issue.
Yeah. And, if you can break through that, you all of a sudden realize that, at the end of the day, myself included, most people in the world are just, they want to be happy. They just want to do well. Most people are,
You want to live a peaceful, regular life.
Yeah, moderate means, middle class houses and, middle class lives and things like that. And, we have to be cognizant and be supportive and helpful of everyone as much as we can be. But at the same on the same token, we also have to remember that there is self-identification and individualism, and you as an individual are responsible for the choices that you make. I hear this rhetoric in student loan debt, for example, all the time, and people look at me like I'm crazy when I say this. My student loan debt is my debt. I made that choice.
Yeah.
I will pay it back. You shouldn't have to. That's not your job. It's just things like that. But at the end of the day, you gotta respect people's opinions and work with them as best as you can.
Well, I think so. And I think it's very important what you said about having that responsibility, about having that openness.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always see that. I mean, and you're right, I've had many conversations, almost always off the record for some reason, with people who are either pundits or advocates or elected offices from the left, the right, the center. A lot of people who will have one conversation with me, and we've literally gone over issues and had a great conversation about a controversial issue.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, we can agree on some certain core benefits or beliefs. And then I go, okay, you want to come on and say that? No.
Yeah, well, that's
it's like,
that's the thing.
But we can get a compromise. We've had this discussion, and people don't believe this all the time, but I've had conversations with people on the fringe left or libertarians or even extreme on the right, where I'm having a conversation and maybe I don't always agree with them, or we're having a discussion, and we can get to a point where it's like, okay, but we have a compromise.
Sure.
Here's where we could meet midway. And I'm like, well, this is what we should talk about. Come on the program. No, I can't do that.
Yeah, the problem in politics today, and truthfully, that's such a cliche thing to say. The politics today, it's always been like this.
Well, there's always been a division.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's always been mind-boggling to me that people think that what you can compromise and work on and your fundamental principles are mutually exclusive concepts. I've never understood that. I've never understood the idea that, as it relates to policy X, my principal beliefs are thing 1 and your principal beliefs are thing 2, but things 3 and 4, there's commonality there.
Right.
And if you get to the point where you can't even sit across the table if 1 and 2 can't sit across the table and at least only discuss 3 and 4, there's something incredibly wrong with the body politic at that point.
If we know that we're absolutely never I like to use the example of the Second Amendment. Okay, so you're completely on the idea of no one should have a gun, and I'm on the point of view of basically everyone should. Let's throw those two things out and let's walk in the middle here and say, okay, what about this? Because we want everyone to be safe. What principles, what ideas can we take from throwing those two things out? What else can we talk about that makes people safe? Let's have that conversation.
Sure.
Because, I'm not changing my point of view. I'm not going to try and change your point of view. So let's throw them out.
Yeah.
And let's actually just focus on, okay, what can we do that we're not going to kill each other over?
True, yeah. But for what it's worth, I'll swing it around the other end too, which is that this is something that, in my particular opinion, people who, in the broader philosophical sense of, founding principles and the Constitution and things like that, in my opinion, we've actually done a horrible job over the last 10 to 20 years of attempting to communicate why we assert.
Yes, we go with soundbite. That's because we have this, and that's why the show's No Soundbites.
Right.
We've become a soundbite culture.
Correct.
Here's the headline in 140 characters. Here's 30 seconds of news coverage of a 4-hour event. Or you're on radio, on TV. Interviews are one sentence. You'll get one sentence of video. Of coverage. It's like, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were so much more than that. And there's so much more we're talking about. That's why I like this format.
Right.
You get to talk.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. In the last 20 years, we've reduced it to so much into that meaningless soundbite that all the real content and the real discussion that goes with it, gone. It's eliminated.
Yeah, no, we've, in my opinion, we've horrifically failed at creating sound, principled arguments as to why the individual is the most fundamental tenet of the United States. As it relates to things like, I'll use an example. What's a hot button issue that they're talking about in national politics now?
Here
we go. The Electoral College.
Oh God!
Right.
Yes.
This is always a great example, right? So people who advocate for the abolition of the Electoral College, in my opinion, if you assert the following idea, they say something like this. I heard Mayor Pete say this at a
Buttigieg.
Mayor
Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his last name.
I probably am.
Yeah. Seems like a very nice guy. And I saw this, someone had tweeted this video of him saying something like this. He said, if we're going to call the United States, if we're going to call ourselves a democracy, then it only makes sense, and I'm paraphrasing, that the election for the highest office in the land, assumably the presidency, should be by popular vote, and everyone gets a vote. And if you read the Constitution, if you read the Federalist Papers, if you look at history in the most objective manner you possibly can, for you to or for anyone rather, to articulate that type of point, that logically leads me to a couple of potential conclusions, right? Either number one, you just genuinely believe that, and that's okay, you have the right to, but as it relates to what you're substantively getting at, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
Number two, you are using ideology to push something.
Yes.
Or number three, you are just, and I say this in the denotative sense, you are ignorant to what the Electoral College actually is.
And I think it's all three.
In some cases, it may be, and again, it's not a left or right thing because you see this on both sides, but yes. It's so overwhelmingly incredible to me. When I teach public policy courses, one of the questions I often ask my student, it's kind of really corny, but you never hear this question a lot. Why is the name of our country the United States of America? What the verbiage means something, right?
So. Right?
Context means something. When you read the Constitution, the unit of analysis is not the nation.
Never.
It's not. It is the state.
Yes.
And the way to think of the Electoral College behind the whole, the extent to which the actual process itself, right? The based upon the apportionment after the census every 10 years, right? A state that, you have this many seats in the House plus 2 senators, so you get, X number of Electoral College votes, right? So in New York, for example, right, we have every state has 2 senators, we have 27 House districts, 27 and 2, we get 29 votes, right? Bam, and it's done. The presidency, the office of the presidency, even as it's laid out in Article 2, is not an institution or an office, if you will, that is to almost kind of say the purveyor of the entire land, right? The idea is that because the state is the unit of analysis, right? The federal government is only to exist to do certain things, right?
Very limited.
Correct. And we refer to those as enumerated powers, right? And I believe there's 30 something. Article 1, Section 8 is what's popping in my mind. But, outside of that, you read the 9th and the 10th Amendments respectfully, right? That allow for enumeration and then
rights.
And then states' rights, right? Being handed down to the states and the people, all right? The point of the Electoral College is to ensure that someone who runs for the office of the presidency is not elected by popular vote.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
It's supposed to be.
You can almost, it almost sounds kind of weird, but you can almost think of it in this sense, right? On election day, every 4 years in an even-numbered year, when the presidency is up for quote-unquote election, so to speak, right? You can almost think of it in a sense of there are 50 states that are holding statewide elections for the office of the presidency, and based upon those majority totals, in those respective states. They are then weighted in the Electoral College, and then with the 270 plus one, right, or 270 rather, then that person has won the majority and of the Electoral College, right, and that person takes office, right? And even if you think about it, President Trump is what? He's 45, right?
Yeah.
So we've had 45 presidents, all of which one, right? FDR served either 1 or 2 terms. That was blanket started by, President Washington back, 2 terms, and I'm done. I'm going back to the farmhouse and, living regular person living out my days. And he set that standard all the way through. People who attempted a third run, people like, Teddy Roosevelt, Ulysses S. Grant, they never got that third term.
Scared people.
Well, yeah. I think we kind of naturally have that idea of, limitation in that sense is
not for Congress.
Yeah. But limitation in that sense is not inherently a bad thing, right? The idea of the citizen legislator is gone. But the, again, bringing it back to that, you can port all these ideas back and forth, but again, if you're not coming from a place of understanding what something is as it was deemed and as it was established, you're already...
And what the whole purpose, what's the underlying purpose and cause.
Exactly.
And I think that's important because most people miss that. We aren't, first of all, we're not a democracy. We say that all the time,
right,
but we're not.
Right.
And so fundamentally, if you're saying, well, we need democratic elections, you're fundamentally wrong. That's just a fact.
As it relates to the residents. Right.
In our elections. That's
correct, right.
That is fundamentally wrong. And there is a fundamental, absolute reason why we're not supposed to be.
Correct.
Which is to benefit the people via the states.
Right.
So that we get representation. Because again, what was the whole point of the whole thing? We weren't getting representation. We wanted representation for the people. That's why we broke away from England, and that's what they wanted to ensure. The people would always have representation,
sure,
not mob rule or singular rule.
Right. In research, it's what's referred to as the tyranny of the majority. Right. So, for example, if we lived in a true absolute majority democracy, right, tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., if a referendum goes out, and 51% of the population says, that whole free speech thing, we don't need it, right? What happens to those inalienable rights that the 49%, right, the numerical minority, what happens to their rights? Do they just go out the window and exit stage right because the 51% said, we're good to go. Have a nice day, and that's the whole idea.
Well, see, I love this because when we start talking, we start getting in deep, which are conversations we should have,
sure, in
the nation, and remember and understand why we're having these conversations, why we have the ability to have these conversations, especially over a Memorial Day weekend.
Correct.
I'm going to switch gears, though.
Sure.
Because I'm going to ask you a question that everyone on the internet is waiting for. Everyone is waiting for this. So is that enough of a build-up for it?
Sure. Yeah, why not? Bring it on. I'm an open book.
Okay. How'd you like the ending of Game of Thrones?
So you are actually, and all of your listeners are going to think I am crazy. I am proud enough to say,
oh God,
that I am a card-carrying member of the 0.0001% of the population that has literally never seen one full episode of Game of Thrones.
Your life is just missing so much.
It's funny actually because people who know me,
I see you as a Tyrion guy.
I'm
a Tyrion guy.
People have said to me, "This is a show that you would love," and when I say, I chose my words very specifically there because if I had said I never watched Game of Thrones, I would actually be lying. I saw probably about 20 to 30 minutes of the first episode, and I don't know what it was. I couldn't.
Oh, it's slow.
I couldn't get into it. I couldn't, and it's funny actually because I tried it a second time, and I think the second time I got through maybe 2/3 of the first episode. I just
see the trick is
and this is what everybody says. The first few episodes are slow.
First
you
three
gotta
episodes,
you gotta get into it, and maybe if I had done the right thing and watched a few more, I would have gotten hooked. But yeah, I have literally I have never seen one full episode, and I've only seen about 75% of literally season 1, episode 1. That was it.
See, if you ever make it past that, the first 3 episodes are slow. It is, although it's a lot of political intrigue, and I like that. Although I also like action, like John Wick 3 and all that. But once you get past that, in the first 4 seasons, you'll love. I truly believe it. After that, it's just downhill, and the season finale was just crap.
That's what I've been reading on Twitter.
Oh God, it's so bad. You can tell the difference between the writers when they had source material,
sure,
and when they didn't. It's like source material, rich, deep world building, intriguing characters. Tyrion, brilliant. Varys, brilliant. Littlefinger, brilliant. These are key characters. These are like the key political, deep thinking characters with webs going all the way through, planning plots and everything.
No, and HBO has put out some good shows. I mean,
they have
Boardwalk Empire. I'm a huge fan of that show.
That one I didn't see.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I think a few of the seasons are actually up on Amazon Prime if you have a membership. Sopranos obviously is a classic. Well, I shouldn't say classic, but I mean, they make great stuff. I don't know what it was. I'm a huge Marvel fan.
So you saw Endgame.
Yeah,
I mean everyone saw Endgame.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I was not impressed.
I was less impressed than Infinity War.
Infinity War, believe it or not, is actually my favorite. And oddly enough, for some strange reason, like there's a bunch of little scenes and stuff. But I actually, believe it or not, just the other night, I was with a few friends, and we rewatched Age of Ultron, and you can actually see how the directors, who's John and Anthony Russo, I think, who did a great job with the whole thing. But there's all these like little things throughout Ultron that I didn't pick up necessarily then, but now that I've seen Endgame,
little tales, little tells about
exactly
where we're going.
Yeah, so it was, but I have to say,
Captain America. America. You know what? I will give Endgame this. Spoilers. If somehow you haven't seen it yet, spoilers. Captain America with Thor's hammer rolling on. Yeah. Because you knew, and I'm an old school comics guy. Yes, I'm one of those nerd geeks. He's held the hammer before in Ultron.
Yep. There was that one scene where he like kind of snugged it up.
Where he didn't look like he was pulling it all that hard.
He
wasn't trying.
I noticed that actually when I was rewatching it again with a few of my friends.
Everyone else is like, okay, we're going to try. He's just like, he's playing along with everyone else.
Sure, totally.
And when he plays and he's just like gave it a little tug and it moved and Thor just goes, uh-oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wasn't surprised when I saw, but it was a great scene. Just seeing him standing there with the shield.
The shield and picking it up. Oh, yeah.
And doing damage.
Yeah.
Probably, and I actually have a screensaver of it too, because it is my favorite shot in Endgame. Is Captain America with a broken shield standing up there, and they do the wide, and all you see is him, the sun behind him, and Thanos and his army all coming at him, and he's like, "Yeah," and you know that wide.
Oh
shot?
Yeah, totally.
I have that as a screensaver.
That's cool.
That is a beautiful shot.
That sounds nice.
So well done. The rest of it, and you could throw out Captain Marvel. That's my own thing. It's why she's in. It's too OP all the way. It's so overpowered.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
she ruins it for me. And the all-girl shot, because it was the all-girl shot.
Which one was them?
When they get all the female characters and they all happen to come together, all at once in this massive battlefield, and they just by accident happen to all come together to rush forward for girl power.
I don't remember that.
It's all
you're actually. I'll tell you and your listeners a little secret. I actually, believe it or not, this is how much of a fan of Endgame I wasn't. So myself and a friend of mine, we saw Endgame opening night. Mm-hmm. You probably think I'm crazy, but I actually fell asleep.
I'm not surprised. It's 3 hours. Man.
No, it wasn't the length of the movie. So that scene opens, Hawkeye's there with his family, and then the wife and the kids, Thanos snaps his fingers, and and everybody disintegrates, and that was really cool. And then I remember, they find Thanos. Thor comes over with the whop. The head comes off, and maybe 10 to 15 minutes after that, I was out. I actually went 3 or 4 days later to go see Endgame again because I literally saw only like 15 or 20 minutes of the beginning and like the last 10 minutes. And I woke up like I couldn't believe because I'm not like that. I'm not a nap person. I sleep 5 hours a night and I'm good to go. But I just couldn't.
It's because you're young.
Yeah. But I don't know. Doesn't beat Infinity War, but that's just my opinion.
Let me tack on, and we got about 9 minutes.
Sure.
So let me get to. I want to ask something serious.
Sure.
A serious thought. I know that in City Council. Mm-hmm. Actually, one question I had. This is a quick one, because I don't get to ask this often enough of elected officials.
Sure.
Did it happen to you, or are you aware of any elected official who has suddenly had their IQ increase because they won an election?
I think there's a lot of people that think that happens.
That's my point. Yeah. People always think, well, they must be smart. They got elected. It's like, no, I talked to them before and after. They're just the same. They didn't get smarter or know anything more because they got elected. But, figure it out. But no, back to the serious. In City Council in Binghamton, New York, upstate New York, there's been a lot of issues, 2 big issues, and I know there's not enough time because we talk about too many other things.
Sure.
Ethics and serving the people.
Sure.
Ethics, I know of, hello, Dan, I see you, and I hear everything. You too, Conrad. I know what happened Friday.
I have no idea.
By the way, Dan is Dan Livingston. He's a councilman. Conrad Taylor is a councilman. I know them. I've spoken with them. And they were at an event on Friday, and there was a reprimand that happened because of it, because they took power into their own hands. And I have sources. I find out things.
I worked on Friday.
So there is a question of ethics that has been going on since 2019, beginning of the year. What do you believe? How important is ethics in elected officials for someone being elected and in serving the public? How important is their ethics?
It's everything. It's everything. I mean, that even comes out of being an elected official, right? That's just,
you would think.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect, myself included. Oh, Lord knows I'm not.
Well, no, there's an understanding of what you don't know.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Sure. Yeah, you learn over time, and I mean, I'm by term, if you will, I'm still technically a freshman legislator. I've never held office before this, so. I've always believed that individuals are lifelong learners, and you learn and you go, and when you make a mistake, you gotta own up to it and try to correct it, and then you move on. Obviously, of course, there's the severity of the mistake or the severity of the issue. I mean, that's arguably infinite in its possibilities, but it's everything. Ethics is everything.
I bring that up because I see there's I see there have been local issues since January of 2019. I reported some of them. There's been state, federal level, and actually state and federal and presidential issues with ethics, all in 2019.
Sure.
Literally, I can point out a case of an ethics violation or of some degree, and in every single one of those cases, I've seen that we're really not seeing anything follow through, except for now on the president, where there is no absolute, it's been resolved, and yet we're still following through on that. That's the only one where it's actually being followed up, but that's a corrupted system itself. But every other case, no one's following up on it. It's just, here's the news, let it die. And that troubles me, and I always wonder, does that trouble the other politicians privately, whether or not you say something publicly? And I know some people do, and some people have on various issues, but do people go behind the scenes going, this is a problem, you got to fix that?
Yeah, I mean, with a very broad brush, right?
And we're talking broadly. I'm not picking on anyone.
No, totally. Broadly, obviously, it's very situational. Notwithstanding what may be, what laws, rules, policies, or regulations may impact situation X at any given time. You might be less okay with something than I am or I'm not, right? So, with the broadest brush, rather, that I possibly can. But yeah, I mean, when instances come up like that, when possible, which should be, at least in my mind, as much as possible, you want to get those things out there, and you want to correct them, and then make them right, and then move forward. Sure.
Okay. You don't hear that. No one ever asks. And it's something I think it's important, because no one really ever asks about that anymore in interviews or to understand. Really, we're spending this time understanding.
Sure.
Both you as the person and also you as the politician, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah,
you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, they're intertwined, of course. Absolutely.
And I think that's important. And that's what I like about the show, that we try and get both of those aspects, so we get a better understanding of what's going on and how we're being led and represented. We've got about 3 minutes.
Sure.
And so, as always, I always like to end every interview with the question of, is there something that, and I know there's things we didn't get to, we actually had intended to talk about a very specific issue.
And we talked about Marvel for 5 minutes.
Yeah. We wanted to talk about 7 Hawley Street, and I know, and you're always welcome to come back or to call in and be on the program at any time. But taking the last few minutes here, is there something that you wanted to come across or to express while we had the opportunity, not just to the local audience, but to the national and international audience?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as it relates to the local audience, at least for the residents that I represent, thank you for the honor and the opportunity to get to serve you over the last 3.5 years now. It's been, and finishing out 4, and we'll push forward, and if we get a second term, great, and we'll keep doing over the next 4 years what we've done over the preceding 4. More broadly, have fun this weekend, relax, take some time to, enjoy family and friends, but just in the back of your mind, remember why we have this weekend, right? Memorial Day is, I'm not sure why, but Memorial Day and Veterans Day, for some reason, their existence often gets, I don't know if it's the right word is misplaced or something mixed together. Right. But Memorial Day is specifically for those who have lost their life in service to their country. Those are our better angels, right? Those are the people who really gave all. So, enjoy, relax, be proud of, what you have, and the fact that there are quite literally spouses who don't have someone sleeping next to them tonight, for your ability to continue to have that. And that would probably be the one thing that I would just want
that's
to remind.
Actually, that's where I started the show, and that's actually going to be the last thing I'm going to end the show with. Is
Right.
There's this great picture of someone writing on a whiteboard with what is the difference between Armed Forces Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day.
Right.
And exactly what you just said, and it's actually where I started the show, and it's where I'm going to end the show. That'll be the last thing that people will be able to see on this screen for the episode, because I think you're right. It is vital and important that we talk about that and remember that, because I started off the show pissed off about John Lind, the American Taliban, and ranting a little bit about it, I suppose. But it is something important to remember and always to keep in our minds, because it is so important. And on that, folks, I do want to bring that up, but I will also say to you, I want to thank you for joining us. We've been here for 2 hours. And I want to thank you, W. Allen McD, for even creating and having this image up on Facebook so people can see what the differences are of those days. I want to thank everyone for joining us here on No Soundbites Allowed in our 200th episode. I think everyone's had a great time with it. I've enjoyed it, especially having our special guest, Dr. Giovanni Scaringi, my good friend Gio, in with us. Our first guest, our 200th guest, and he will be on many times in between and going forward. But otherwise, folks, enjoy the holiday, be well, and we will be back here on Tuesday at 1 p.m. speaking with you, because you are the best audience I could possibly have.
Happy Memorial Day. God bless.
Happy Memorial Day. Bye-bye.